At the heart of Los Angeles, under a velvet black sky pricked with city lights, the gala of the season unfolded like a scene from a dream. The air was heavy with fragrance, gardenias, oud, and wealth. Golden chandeliers rained warm light on polished marble floors, and cameras flashed in bursts as A-listers arrived, one luxury car after another. It was the kind of night where power dressed in silk and diamonds, and silence spoke louder than words. Among the crowd, Shante Broadus stepped into the venue with an aura that defied the noise around her. Her gown, a deep emerald green with hand-stitched crystal accents, hugged her form with elegance and poise. She walked not with arrogance, but with the calm dignity of someone who didn't need to prove her worth. On her arm was her husband, Calvin Broadus, known to the world as Snoop Dogg. He wore a tailored tuxedo with a quiet flair, every move smooth, eyes constantly scanning, not out of fear but instinct. If you're drawn into this real-life drama, don't forget to subscribe for more true celebrity stories that inspire and ignite. Shante had always been more than the rapper's wife. She was his partner in business and in life, the backbone of their empire. She rarely chased the spotlight, but when it caught her, it reflected something rare: authenticity. As they made their way through the golden archways of the Grand Savoy Hotel, the room buzzed with a curated crowd. Designers, influencers, legacy actors, and a handful of billionaires. Near the staircase that led to the main ballroom stood Marco Virelli, a celebrated fashion designer known for pushing boundaries on the runway and politics behind the scenes. He greeted guests with choreographed charm, air kisses, flashes of white teeth, and knowing nods to those he deemed worthy. Shante and Snoop approached. Marco looked directly at them, then smoothly shifted his gaze to a rising fashion influencer beside them. With calculated precision, he extended his hand to the influencer, complimenting her shoes, then pivoted to embrace a socialite behind Shante. Not a glance, not a word, not even a nod was offered to her. The air thickened. Shante kept walking. Her spine stayed straight, her smile unwavering. She had seen worse. She had lived through the kind of storms that broke lesser people. But that didn't mean the slight didn't sting. A nearby event coordinator, young and wide-eyed, whispered unintentionally loud, "Wait, wasn't that his wife?" "Like Snoop's wife?" Her voice dropped as someone whispered back, "Yeah, but he probably didn't recognize her. Or maybe he just didn't care." Snoop heard it all. He said nothing. Not then. He merely glanced at Marco with the kind of calm that chilled the room. His hand on Shante's lower back never moved, a steady presence. Photographers, oblivious to the tension, continued clicking. But those with trained eyes saw the flicker. Something was wrong. A notable pause. A silent message exchanged in glances, in breaths held and released. As they entered the ballroom, Snoop said quietly, "Let's not stay too long." Shante nodded. The couple sat at their table, received by other guests with warmth and recognition. But the moment had already taken root. It echoed quietly in Shante's heart, not as rage but as resolve. And Snoop? He wasn't angry, not in the way people expected. He wasn't about to shout or make a scene, because real power doesn't always react with volume. It waits, it watches, and when it moves, the world notices. The ballroom pulsed with orchestral jazz and golden light, yet beneath the surface, a new current stirred. Waitstaff glided between tables like whispers, serving plates of seared halibut and aged wine. But at table 12, silence spoke volumes. Snoop leaned back slightly in his chair, watching the evening unfold with a stillness that belied his every thought. His expression was unreadable to most, but Shante knew that look. It was the same calm he wore when negotiating million-dollar deals, or when someone underestimated him on principle. From across the room, Marco Virelli continued to bask in admiration, unaware, or perhaps unconcerned, about the stone he had just cast. A photographer near him reviewed images on his camera, casually flipping through frames. Tamika Hayes, the event's lead coordinator and longtime Hollywood fixer, made her rounds, ensuring the gala ran smoothly. Her eyes met Snoop's for a moment. She smiled. He did not. He stood. His movements were measured. He wasn't a man given to theatrics, but in that instant heads turned, not because he demanded attention, but because his silence carried weight. He walked toward Marco's circle, hands clasped loosely behind his back. A murmur traveled ahead of him like a warning. The influencers shifted uncomfortably, unsure if this was the moment drama would explode in glitter and scandal. Marco spotted him and extended a hand with that ever-slick smile. "Ah, Mr. Broaddus, an honor, as always." Snoop didn't shake it. Instead, he let the air hang. "I wanted to thank you," Snoop said coolly, "for reminding me that not everyone sees royalty when she's standing right in front of them." Marco's smile faltered, confused. "No worries," Snoop cut in smoothly. "It's easy to miss something when your eyes are only on the moment's trend." A beat passed, then he turned. He didn't yell, he didn't accuse. But his words, calm as ocean waves, carried across the gala like thunder. No microphone needed. Tamika Hayes approached, catching up to him quickly. "Snoop, listen," she began in a practiced tone of apology. "Marco didn't mean—" "I'm not here for excuses," he said quietly. "I'm here for my wife. And we're done for the night." Tamika froze. Her reputation was built on smoothing over celebrity friction. But Snoop wasn't moving like someone who could be negotiated with. He was moving like someone who had made a decision and wouldn't entertain discussion. Shantay had already risen. She met him halfway, looping her arm in his naturally. No drama, no scene, just grace. As they walked toward the exit, a few reporters scrambled, cameras clicking not in scheduled bursts but in anxious flurries. The couple passed under the archway they had entered just an hour before, but this time the spotlight wasn't staged. It was earned. Outside, the air was cooler, the city a blur of lights and hushed disbelief. Snoop opened the door of their car himself, helping Shantay in gently. Inside, she looked at him. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he replied, starting the engine. "But sometimes silence deserves an answer, just not the one they expect." Back in the ballroom, phones began buzzing. One tweet read, "Snoop Dogg just handled disrespect like a king. No shouting, no drama, just dignity." "Respect Shantay." Snoop moved silently. Another, "What just happened at the Savoy Gala?" Snoop walked out like he owned the place and left everyone speechless. The night wasn't over. It was just beginning. By sunrise, the city buzzed with something more than smog and caffeine. The gala might have ended hours earlier, but its aftershock had just begun to ripple through the digital world. Tweets, Instagram stories, and blurry TikTok clips stitched together a narrative faster than any tabloid could. The hashtag #RespectShantay trended within hours. Close behind it, "Snoop moves silently." Someone had caught the moment when Snoop gently but deliberately refused Marco Virelli's handshake. The audio was muffled, but the tone was unmistakable. Calm, disappointed, powerful. Across timelines, the comment section surged with emotion. "This right here is what real love looks like. He said everything without raising his voice. That's leadership." They disrespected the wrong queen, and the king handled it perfectly. Not everyone agreed, of course. There were voices claiming the moment had been blown out of proportion, that Marco likely hadn't even realized who Shantay was. But those voices were drowned in a growing wave of commentary dissecting the optics, the implications, the broader pattern of exclusion that women like Shantay, black, poised, not chasing clout, often faced in elite spaces. Clips of Shantay's quiet composure circulated with captions like, "Unbothered, undeniable." One side-by-side comparison showed her walking past Marco and the influencer who had been greeted in her place. The contrast was chilling. By mid-morning, celebrities began to chime in. Taraji P. Henson reposted the clip on her story with a single word, "respect." Gabrielle Union tweeted, "Shantay Broaddus has been a boss, always will be." Even Dwayne Johnson weighed in. "Grace under pressure. Real ones move like this. Salute." And then Snoop tweeted. It was only 9 words, no hashtags, no explanation. "Treat my queen like the royalty she is." It was retweeted over 400,000 times in 6 hours. That single post tipped the conversation from outrage to reverence. It wasn't just about what happened at the gala anymore. It was about what the moment represented. Visibility, recognition, quiet strength in a world addicted to spectacle. Back at their home, nestled in a quiet corner of Diamond Bar, Shantay sat on the back patio, coffee in hand, watching the sky shift from grey to gold. Her phone buzzed non-stop, but she ignored most of it. She hadn't said a word publicly yet, not because she didn't care, but because she was listening. Snoop joined her, phone in his pocket, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You broke the internet," she said dryly, taking a sip. "Nah," he replied, sitting beside her. "You did, I just reminded them." Inside, their team was already fielding calls. News outlets, PR reps, even brands. Everyone wanted a comment, an interview, a photo shoot. But Shantay wasn't interested in capitalizing, she was interested in clarity. What surprised her most wasn't the disrespect. She'd faced that before. What struck her was how many people saw it, how many people cared, and how many young girls would read this moment not as a slight, but as a stand. That evening, Marco Virelli's team released a statement. "We deeply regret any oversight and hold the utmost respect for Shantay Broaddus and all women who inspire us every day." The internet wasn't impressed. "Sounds like a PR bot wrote this. Didn't even spell her name right the first time they posted it. Too late. The energy has shifted." And indeed, it had. A moment of exclusion had turned into a mirror for the entire industry. And Shantay Broaddus, without saying a word, was at the center of it. The apology was released at 2:13 p.m. on a muted beige background, adorned with Marco Virelli's signature in gold script. It was, by all technical standards, correct, acknowledging the incident, naming Shantay Broaddus respectfully this time, and pledging to re-evaluate internal protocols for red carpet and event recognition. But it rang hollow. The internet had grown wise to polished statements wrapped in shallow regret. Comments beneath the post tore through the facade. "You didn't apologize when it happened. You apologized when you started trending. If it had been a pop star or influencer with 10 million followers, this wouldn't have happened. Period." The narrative had moved beyond the man and his brand. Now it was about every time someone had walked into a room and felt unseen, dismissed, erased. And in the middle of it all, Shantay finally spoke. It wasn't on a talk show. It wasn't through a viral TikTok. It was during a quiet conversation on a radio podcast hosted by a friend, one that usually focused on music, family, and business. "I wasn't shocked," she said softly, the warmth of her voice wrapping around every word. "It happens, not just to me, to women everywhere. To women who aren't loud, who don't fit into boxes people are used to celebrating, but I don't need to be seen by everyone to know my worth." The clip of her voice was shared everywhere. Simple, grounded, unshaken. She didn't raise accusations. She didn't shade anyone. And that perhaps is what made her words feel like truth rather than noise. Later that week, Shantay and Snoop attended a charity brunch in Pasadena. She wore a sleek white suit with minimalist jewelry. He wore a black tee under his blazer that simply read, "Queen Shantay." The shirt went viral before the event was even over. What followed wasn't a wave of drama, but a rising tide of support. Young women shared stories of similar moments, at boardrooms, in meetings, on red carpets of their own. Women in tech, women in politics, women in film. The momentum was undeniable. Brands began to reach out, not for apology tours, but for partnerships. But Shantay wasn't interested in empty visibility. She chose carefully. Within a week, she announced a new initiative, the Crown Table, a mentorship network connecting underrepresented women in entertainment and business with seasoned leaders who moved with grace and strategy. Not influencers chasing clout, women building legacies. The response was electric. Meanwhile, Marco Virelli's next fashion line, scheduled to debut in Milan, was quietly postponed. Rumors whispered of internal chaos, shaken board members, and celebrity ambassadors pulling out discreetly. And still, Shantay didn't celebrate his fall. She didn't post cryptic messages or fan the flames, because power didn't live in revenge. It lived in redirection, it lived in elevation. Snoop stood by her through it all, not in front, not behind, but beside. When asked by a reporter what he thought of all the noise, he simply said, "It's not noise, it's change." That evening, an invitation arrived at their home. A major global brand, one that had long celebrated high-profile women, wanted Shantay to lead a new campaign. Not as an accessory, not as someone's wife, but as the face. The room was silent for a moment after the letter was read. Then Snoop smiled, leaned back and said, "Told you, they gon' learn today." Shantay just shook her head, laughing. "Let's make sure they learn something worth remembering." The launch was unlike anything Shantay had ever experienced. Across billboards in New York, Tokyo, Johannesburg, and Sao Paulo, her face emerged, not as a muse or a silent silhouette, but as a leader. The campaign was titled "Visible, Valuable, Unshaken," and its message rippled far beyond fashion or fame. It wasn't just about clothes, it was about presence. Her opening speech at the press event was watched live by over 3 million viewers. Cameras clicked, flashbulbs burst. But she remained centered, focused, deeply grounded in her own truth. "There was a time when being overlooked made me question myself," she said. "Now I know it says more about others than about me, and I know I'm not alone. This is for every woman who had to clap for herself in rooms that stayed silent." The crowd stood to applaud, not out of obligation, but because they recognized something sacred. Not everyone welcomed the spotlight she now held. Pundits and opinion writers debated whether her rise was genuine or trend-based fame. But she didn't waste energy on cynics. She spent it building. Shantay launched the Crown Table Foundation, hosting monthly seminars for young women entering creative industries. From fashion to film, tech to TV, she hired women from overlooked communities. She funded scholarships. And most importantly, she listened. She'd never asked for this platform, but once it came, she honored it. And through it all, Snoop stayed close. Not as a shadow, not as a shield, but as a silent echo of her power. He was seen less in press, but more in moments, bringing her coffee during long work sessions, carrying chairs backstage, laughing with interns like they were family. The world began to understand something they had missed before. Snoop Dogg wasn't just the legend behind the mic. He was the man who knew his queen didn't need saving. She needed space, and he made sure she had all of it. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Shantay received a message projected onto the wall of a rooftop restaurant in downtown LA. It simply read, "You've always been the main event." Love C. A week later, she returned to the Grand Savoy Hotel, the site of that fateful gala, not for revenge, for an awards ceremony. She was being honored for her contributions to culture, entrepreneurship, and advocacy. As she walked up the same steps, in a gown designed by a young black woman she had mentored, the whispers were different now. Not "who is she," but "that's her," not "did they ignore her," but "she changed everything." And when she took the stage, the room stood again. Marco Virelli was nowhere in sight. This time the cameras didn't look away, and neither did history. Inspired by this journey? Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful real-life stories that redefine fame. And if you want to see another unforgettable story of resilience and class, click the video on screen now.